right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our ARMA Hawaii Chapter Lunch and Learn session. Thank you to our sponsors, Access, Balfour, and Canon for making this event possible. For attendees who might not know what ARMA International is, it is the world's leading information management membership organization whose vision is to be the driving force that enables organizations to harness the strategic power of information. My name is Isabel Yang, and I am honored to be on the board of directors for the ARMA Hawaii chapter. In my day job, I am a compliance specialist at Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union, where some of my duties include records management. Because my credit union implemented a new Laserfish system to contain our records, I recently attended Laserfish's user conference and was very blessed to meet our presenter for today's session, Melissa Hanley. I really was thoroughly captivated by her presentation at the conference and was so thrilled that she agreed to share her knowledge at this lunch and share. Melissa, before we formally get started with your presentation, would you mind sharing with us a brief description of your company, what it does, Laserfish, and what motivates you in your role as the Senior Director of Customer Experience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Laserfish is one of the largest providers of content management in the world. We also have a DoD 5015.2 certified records management solution, which I'm proud to say that every year when it's certified, they always tell us it's very easy to use and they enjoy certifying ours, which, you know, that's always fun to hear. But what motivates me in my role, well, I don't know, you may have heard me telling Isabel while we were chatting, waiting for everyone to log in, that I've been with Laserfish for almost 15 years now. And I think what motivates me the most is our customers and getting to work with our customers. I love our customers. I love seeing them succeed. I love hearing them, how they make a difference in their organizations. I love hearing their successes. And that just really, you know, keeps me excited and coming back every day.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that. If you want to, I guess we'll go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you. I wish I were with you in person. You know, when this is all over, you know, feel free to invite me to come to Hawaii in person. I would love to. So welcome to Drive Change Without Driving Your Colleagues Crazy. So a few things, feel free to put any questions you have as we go along in the Q&A box, and I will get to those at the end. If you have any other comments, you want to chat with your fellow attendees, feel free to use the chat box. One quick note, this presentation is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording after the presentation. So who am I? Well, you've heard a little bit about me. I do work for Laserfish. I am the Senior Director of Customer Experience, and I talk about change management a lot. And you may say, well, Melissa, what does change management have to do with enterprise content management? And you'd be surprised. It has a lot to do with this. Change management and getting people to adapt to a new way of working is probably the biggest challenge I hear from our customers. It's a bigger challenge than, you know, getting funding. It's a bigger challenge than it is their biggest challenge, because when you think about it, getting people to change the way they work is hard. So this is a topic I talk about frequently with our customers, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you. And one thing to note, I did have one of my formal headshots there from you know, before times, and I actually had to change it out because I don't look anything like I used to look. My hair is longer, it's a different color. So I have a brand new headshot taken by myself on my iPhone for that. So tell me what you think, if I should take up a career in iPhone portrait photography. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about what we all know is difficult, which is getting people to change the way they work. We all know it takes buy-in to make organizational change happen, especially when you're building support for a new technology initiative. But we know it's not easy to get people on board. So today we're going to cover the reasons people resist change, how to use neuroscience to your advantage, some success stories from others who have led change efforts in their own organizations, and tips and tricks you can apply back at your own office. So let's get started. So if you're thinking about pushing change in your organization, awesome. I mean, we all need to change. If we didn't change, we'd end up like Blockbuster, left by the side of the road. But if you're going to be an advocate for change, it's really helpful to understand what you're up against, at least psychologically speaking. Because it's not just that people fear change, although they do. It's also that there is this mentality that if you've been doing things one way for a certain amount of time, it must be the best way to do things. And the longer you've been doing it that way, the better it is. So change isn't just simply about embracing something unknown. It's about giving up something old and therefore good for something new and therefore not good. Think about crossing your arms. And let's do a little exercise right now, okay? I want all of you in your offices, in your houses, wherever you are, to cross your arms. Okay, cross your arms with me. Right? It's easy. Okay, now I want you to cross your arms the other way. How did that feel for you? And you can drop that in the chat. Was it easy? Was it hard? I actually think I might have crossed I did. I crossed my arms the same way. So there you go. It's a perfect example. Change is hard. It's hard to do. Simple as crossing your arms a different way is hard. If you carry a purse or a bag and I ask you to switch shoulders, it's hard to switch to a different shoulder because you're used to doing it one way. Now, I told you to cross your arms a different way. Did it hurt anything for you to change? Not really, right? Would it hurt? Was it easy? I mean, it wasn't hard, but it was hard mentally for you to change. And I didn't give you a good reason to change. And that's a problem right there. We don't give people a good reason to change. They are even more resistant because stasis is easy. I know I talked a little bit about Laserfiche, and our company founder, Nailing, she always used to talk about our biggest competitor. It's not another software company. It's what she called the paper security blanket. And what she meant by that is it's not literally someone like under paper at their desk, but the paper security blanket is the comfort of the way things have always been done. So when we came in and said, hey, you guys need to digitize your records, you need to implement an electronic file plan, we weren't fighting against another vendor doing the same thing. We were fighting against people being like, nope, I got my files right here, got my paper right here. I know where it is. It's good. It's good the way it is. I don't need to change. Everything's fine the way it is. Why? There is no good reason to change. So when we talk about change management, it's helpful to make sure we're all on the same page. So change management, it's all about people. And it's making sure that the change you're trying to seek is thoroughly, smoothly, and lastingly implemented. So when you're talking about change, typically what that means is a few things. First, sponsorship, making sure that there's buy-in for the change at your executive level within the organization. So we're going to assume you already have this, that you've already gotten the go-ahead for your initiative. Next up, you've got buy-in, which is getting people to buy into the change from those who are involved. And then you've got the involvement, which is making sure the right people are involved in the design and implementation of changes. Impact, figuring out who's going to have to change and addressing how those changes will impact people. Of course, communication, probably most important, telling people what's going to change, and then readiness, making sure that people are ready to change. So that's kind of a big, a 10,000 foot look at change. So when it comes to change management, one of the reasons that organizations resist change is, I like to say, it's kind of, they always default to the me, right? They're sort of like they default to the way things always have been because it's hard to change. It's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. It's difficult. And in that sense, they're like human brains. They're really resistant to change and reliant on stability. And so there's a new change management approach, which is based in neuroscience, that's called neuro leadership, that is designed to help engage the hearts and minds of those who need to change. And that's so they won't just be able to change, but they'll be willing to change. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So say your boss came into your office and said, hey, look, Melissa, like, I know you love this adorable picture of your nephews, but it's going to have to go. No more picture of your nephews on your desk. And you know what, your monitor that's over here, it's going to have to switch to over there. And your red swing line stapler, no more. You're going to have to use a gray stapler. And, you know, all your pictures are going to have to move to the other side of your desk. What would your reaction be? Would you be happy about it? It's not a big, like, would it really be, you know, would it really be difficult for you to use a different stapler, or move your pictures to the other side of your desk, or move your monitor? I mean, it wouldn't, right? It wouldn't like derail your whole day, but it would be difficult because you have things set up the way they're set up because you like them. It's comfortable for you. And so your immediate response would be, no, I'm not doing that. No. Go ask someone else to change their desk. I'm fine the way it is. Part of it is, again, there was no good reason to change, but the other part of it is that threatens your social environment. It threatens sort of the way your environment and how you have it set up. And this example, it demonstrates how our brains are prone to react negatively to change. Now, according to social neuroscience researchers, the reason it lies in human evolution. In short, our ancestors, they depended just as much on social belonging for survival as they did on food and shelter. So if you didn't have the right social standing, you could actually die faster. So when your environment changes, it challenges your sense of stability, and it can actually activate the fight or flight sense in your brain. So in the workplace, we often think of it as logical and transaction based, but it's not, right? Because people's the workplace? It's people. People are not logical and transaction based. People are emotional. And so you really have to be cognizant of the emotions of the people you're dealing with. So when you're thinking about change management, there's a couple elements you have to consider, but one of the most important is what we like to think of is the latitude of acceptance or rejection. So we can think of anyone's attitude on a continuum from pro to con. And wherever you are on this latitude, you will probably entertain some views, but only, you'll only be able to move a little bit. So I like to use the example of my brother here. My brother hates onions. He has hated onions since we were kids. Like, I'm talking about if anything on his plate touched an onion, he would not eat any of it. So am I going to get even with all my change management skills, am I going to, after 40 years, get my brother to be like, I love onions. I'm going to go eat some onion rings. Let's go split an onion blossom, an awesome blossom. No. I'm going to get my brother to maybe be like, okay, if there's some onion flavoring, maybe some minced onions that are cooked way down, I might eat a bite of this. That's more likely. So you have to think about it that way. And you need to think, what do I need from this person? Do I really need my brother to become like, yay, onions are the best food ever? Or is it okay to have him be like, okay, I don't mind if you use onions, but I'm just not going to eat it. But I also won't go around being like, there's onions in this, it's terrible, everyone avoid it. So when you're trying to think about what you need to do here, you want to think about a couple questions with your stakeholders. What do they think about the proposed change? Are they, I hate onions, like broadcasting it to the world? Or are they like, okay, onions aren't my favorite, but whatever, it doesn't matter to me, I'll just be quiet about it. If you need to get them to change their attitude, what can you do to take them from where they are to where you need them to be? Could it be just being like, hey, bro, can you just, I want your kids to not hate onions. So could you maybe stop screaming about how much you hate onions? Can you get other people to help advocate the change instead of having to do everything yourself. And most important is, how much change do you require from each person? Again, do they need to come completely around to embrace your view, or is it all right to just have them be like, I'm never going to like onions, but I'm also okay if you like onions. And I'm sorry, I don't know why I picked onions as an example today. So if you're an onion hater, you can feel free to tell me in the chat. So there's actually an exercise that we can use for this, and we call it the 4P exercise. And in this exercise, it helps us figure out who needs to change and who we probably need to move along the latitude of acceptance. So to do this, you want to figure out your first P, the project. What is your oh, thank you. I see someone who says onions rule. All right, Erica. So figure out what your project is. The second is purpose. Why are we changing? The third is particulars. What are we changing? And the fourth is people. Who will be changing? And so when you do this exercise, you can start to lay out, okay, we're going to need, Melissa to change the way she files records. And we're going to need Jane to change the way she retrieves records. And then you can start to figure out, okay, if we need these people to change, how much do we need them to change? Maybe we need Melissa to change more because she's going to change how she files. Maybe Jane has to change less because it's instead of filling out, a paper form to retrieve a record, she now is going to fill out an electronic form. Whatever it is, this exercise will help you do that. So the big thing we're going to talk about today is something called the change curve. And it's a model that we use to understand organizational change and predict how people will react. And if this looks familiar to you, it is probably because you have taken a psychology class. And if you recognize this, you can drop it in the chat and tell me you recognize it and what you recognize it from. But if you don't, this looks really similar to the Kubler-Ross curve, which is a model of how you adapt to grief. It's these stages of emotions that are experienced by a person who is approaching death or is a survivor of an intimate death. And it's all the emotions that you go through, denial, bargaining, anger, acceptance, that you go through to process either your own death or the death of someone close to you. And surprisingly, Kubler-Ross realized after she finished her research on grief that this actually tied in really closely to organizational change, because it turns out changing is actually pretty similar to grieving. Both change and grieving involve a loss of the way things were and an adjustment to a new normal. And so every organization goes through this when you're initiating a change. It's the denial, the change needs to happen, the anger about the change, the maybe this will be okay, exploring stage, and then the acceptance when the change finally becomes part of day-to-day life. And so learning more about this curve allows you to actually help guide change in a positive way. So we're going to actually dive into each stage on the change curve in more detail. So let's talk about the first stage, denial. It is not just a river in Europe. It's been a long day in Egypt, that other thing that starts with an E, not just a river in Egypt. So let's talk about denial. So we are probably, if you've ever tried to implement a change in your organization or in your personal life for that matter, you will probably recognize this stage. If you have ever heard things like, this won't work here, things are fine the way they are, we tried this once before 10 years ago and it didn't work, so why are we trying this again? Why do you need to cause problems? Welcome, you are in the denial stage. And this is a stage that employees, they're kind of in shock. They're not able to digest the fact that they have to undergo change and they're going to have to learn something new. And it's a lot of this, again, you're going to hear this, two things you're going to hear over and over from me during the rest of this presentation. One, a lot of these behaviors are driven by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change. Second, as a leader, every one of these stages is driven by communication. And I know you're saying, Melissa, you're a marketer, right? Of course you think about communication. But in the case of change management, we all need to think like marketers a little bit, because you have got to communicate. In this case, denial, you really need to get information in front of people. People are often afraid because they don't understand. And why don't they understand? Because they don't know. So in this case, you got to get information in front of people and let them know, like, here's what we know, here's what's coming. And there are a lot of ways you need to do that. It's not just, I always like to use the example of an HR department that sends out an email on Friday at 3 p.m. and then runs. That is not the way to avoid this stage. This is more like show up at meetings, have one-on-one conversations. Think about socializing your idea. And there are also tools and techniques you can use to draw people out of denial, because the way to combat denial is with information. And we can be strategic about the way we deliver this information. We need to convey what's happening in a way that emphasizes that the initiative that we're pushing is not only unavoidable, but it's also urgent, strategic, and helpful for your organization as a whole. And we can do this through a combination of executive support and real-life scenario depictions. So if we've gotten to the point where we're onboarding our peers and colleagues, chances are executive management has already okayed the decision to move forward and sees the value in your project. And so when you harness executive support, it shows others that it's a strategic decision for the organization. Now, because in the best case, like, your peers will probably like and respect you, but they may not see your project as urgent or important. Now, if their boss, and especially their boss's boss, are talking about it, it's likely that other people are going to understand the importance. I always like to use the example here of one of our customers that they had to have invoices approved in a certain amount of time by law. And it wasn't happening. And they tried notifications. They tried notifying the boss when it wasn't happening, and nothing really changed, right? So instead, they used a workflow, and instead of notifying the boss, they started notifying the boss's boss. Guess what happened? Anyone want to guess? Write it in the chat if you have a good guess. Well, if you're guessing it was 99% compliance within 2 weeks of this being implemented, you're correct. And it's because of the support from the executives. So if you can get executives to model the way, particularly with a new technology initiative, share how they're going to use the new technology and show others how they're using the system, it will help people to buy in too. Oops, sorry, I got too excited about our next one. But executive buy-in, it doesn't have to be a cold directive. One of our customers, they actually had, they were implementing a new electronic records management initiative, and they had they printed up these neon pink t-shirts that said, ask me how I'm saving money. And they had all the executives wear them around. And so again, this is a case where your organization best, but this is also a case where if you can get that executive support and show that there is support for this from the top down, that can really help drive support and avoid that denial. Because if it's support from the top down, your denial isn't going to change things. So in stage 1, we really need to make the project real for people. And it's great to say we want to improve processes in our organization, but what does that really mean for just a regular person on a daily basis? So we can help people see the impact your project will have by posing real life scenarios of what our daily life will look like after the project has been completed. So we like to talk about sharing the dream. So pick a few activities that everyone dreads, select a few common pain points to focus on fixing. Maybe it's filing papers, like everyone hates that. So share how your headache will be stopped by your project. In this case, switching to electronic form submissions, which are automatically filed in your electronic document repository. Help them to actually visualize what their future state will look like after the technology has been implemented. And you can use a simple exercise to do this, and we call it the future states exercise. So basically, you just say, this is the future state, and this is how we'll impact 5 individuals, this is how we'll impact them. So, we are going to implement new electronic filing. okay, this will change it for this person in this way. It will change it for this person in this way. And this will really help you see how and who you need to get support from. It's a good way to think through to make sure you're not missing anyone, especially when you're trying to build support for your project. But denial, unfortunately, it's not the end. As people start to react to the change, they will probably start feeling concern, resentment, or fear. They will likely resist actively or even passively. And that leads us to stage 2 of the change curve, which is anger, represented by the Hulk here. So, anger. Anger happens when people realize, hey, no matter how much I deny that it's happening, this change is actually happening and I can't avoid it. And this is when you'll start hearing things like, why do you have to be so difficult? You know, things were fine before you started causing problems. I don't know why you have to be so difficult. What is your problem? Why do you have to try and change things? Everything's fine the way it is. And you'll hear a lot of complaining, anger, and bitterness. And this isn't personal. It's not directed at you. It's because, again, it's coming from fear. People are being pushed out of their comfort zone and they're uncomfortable. They're scared. What's going to happen? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my job? And so in this stage, one thing that's really helpful is, again, communication. But in this case, you really have to provide that listening ear. And one technique is really helpful here is to ask people, just let them vent and let them, ask, a lot of times you can say things like, I understand your concerns. What would you like me to do with this information? Are you just looking to complain, which is fine, or do you want me to do something with this information? And 9 times out of 10, people will be like, oh no, I'm just complaining. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm happy to listen to you complain. But as a leader, one thing that's on you is to listen to all these complaints and hear if there's a common thread. If everyone is coming to you complaining, like, I don't understand what's happening, I don't understand why this is happening, maybe that's a sign that you need some better communication to the organization as a whole. A complaint is one of the best things you can get because it shows that people are engaged and they care. When people stop complaining, that's when you need to worry, because it means that people are disengaged and completely checked out. So in this stage, we can combat anger by building a community of support. When we feel that there are people and resources in place to support our transition, it feels less like a personal attack and more like positive momentum building in the organization. And it's important as possible to bring fun to this stage. For example, how many of you have had to transition from an old boss to a new one? A lot of times it can be difficult to start over. You've built a reputation with your manager, you know what they expect and how to submit your projects. When someone new comes along, like assuming you liked your previous boss, it could be really upsetting. However, if your new boss, decides to take you out to lunch, ask about your preferences and work style, show their support, communicate how best to work with them, you're much likely to let go of your anger. So in the case of onboarding users to a new project, some ways to help build a support network are to establish an internal user group, host lunch and learns like the one we're on right now, or throw a kickoff party. Because of social distancing restrictions we all might be under right now, I'm going to focus on internal user groups. So are any of you currently involved in an internal user group? And I'll give you a second to drop a yes in the chat if you are. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone is in a user group right now. Oh, but I see someone is thinking of starting one. That's excellent. Well, user groups are a great tool to build camaraderie and support around a project. I mean, definitely right here, right now, this is a great opportunity to share ideas, bounce ideas off each other, talk about, things you may be facing. But internally in your own organization, hosting regular meetings for staff allows you to share best practices and offer advice to people that may be struggling. And user groups are an approachable place to raise questions and even better share success. This is a great opportunity to spotlight your champions, share successful initiatives, and have your champions market the project for you. I mean, think about what we talked about with executive sponsorship. Wouldn't it be great to have senior management present at the first group on how they're using the new technology? Sometimes as change champions, we can feel like broken records. At a user group, you can let other people sort of talk for you. They can help carry the water for you so you're not doing it alone. And you can do user groups in a lot of different ways. Obviously, with social distancing, we're under a little bit of a different situation than we would be normally, but you can do them virtually. You can host lunch and learns. There are a lot of different ways to run an internal user group. And if this is something you're interested in, you can feel free to reach out to me. We have lots of resources on how to run a user group that I'd be happy to share. So you've gone through denial, you've gone through anger. What's next? And that's exploring. This is a turning point for individuals in your organization. Because once you get to stage 3, you start to come out of that danger zone and you're on your way to making success of all the changes that you're trying to implement. So the third stage of the change curve is exploration. And that's where realizing change is here to stay. And you'll start to know you're in this stage when people start coming to you and saying things like, hey, I was thinking about our new records management project. And would it work if we did XYZ, or could we do this? Or I was thinking I might like to get involved in this way. And this is where people start being constructive. This is a stage we all want to get to, right? Where people start to realize, okay, it doesn't matter how much I complain, doesn't matter how much I vent, doesn't matter how angry I am, I better get on board or be left behind. And this is really where people are experimenting with the change to find out what's in store for them. So it's a good sign that people are beginning to move on and embrace the change. So how do we help people move through this stage and move to integrating the change? Well, as people explore, they gain comfort with the new normal and move closer to acceptance. And there are a number of techniques that as leaders we can employ to foster experimentation. First, we can create a sandbox for exploration, and then we can separate out some small steps to take to move people closer to adoption, and then we can finally start the transition. So let's talk a little bit about a sandbox. Oftentimes, technology systems will allow you to set up a demonstration environment or test system. And this is a great way to allow users to play around without worrying about breaking something or accessing something confidential. It lets them feel more confident. And again, it all comes back to fear. The more confident they feel, the less fearful they are, and the more likely they are to embrace the change. So you can help them out in this stage by scripting out a sample scenario so they can walk through how the process might work for them. At Laserfish, we like to make it fun. So sometimes we might have a scenario involving our laser investigators where our trainees are playing the role of Sherlock Holmes. Or you could be creative and encouraging them to develop their own scenario. And, this is, again, a stage where fun is okay. Maybe they decide to come up with something crazy and off the wall. Let them. The more they feel ownership in this stage, the better, because they start to buy into it. But regardless of who scripts the activity, this is an effective way to support your users because people are more engaged in hands-on activities as opposed to lecture, which is why I'm going to stop talking a bit. I promise. There's not that much. We only have one more stage to go after this. So as people begin to explore your new system, you want to provide a runway for onboarding. You can start by breaking down the transition to the new system in steps. Train users on bite-sized pieces of the systems and give them time to adjust before moving on. For example, many customers implementing electronic records management will scan the documents in their new system, but keep the paper files for a few weeks. That way, people still have a safety net in case they're struggling to adapt. Or they might not scan archives at all for a while and just start with new documents coming in and just train people on what to do with the new process. There's a couple different ways to manage this, but you can either, whether you start with scanning the archives or start with the new information going forward, you can, it makes it a lot easier to just this part rather than all of this. And finally, we want to start moving people over to the new process and system. So you're going to need to set a timeline for switching over. With the team, you want to pick out which activities you want to adopt first. This will likely correlate to the baby steps you identified in the previous exercise. Then again, communicate. You need to set clear expectations on what will be happening and schedule a time to switch. Now, this doesn't mean you have to completely get rid of the old process. It just means that you're self-enforcing a break-off point. But by giving people room and time to experiment, you're able to let skeptics come to terms with what's happening without being forceful and rigid. People appreciate that you're taking the time to consider what they'll need to change and are conscientious in the way that you're handling the transition. Taking this approach will ultimately help people move towards acceptance, the final stage in the change curve. And this stage is the one you've been waiting for. This is where change starts to become second nature and people embrace the improvements to the way they work. Now, acceptance is the final stage of the change curve when peace reigns throughout the land, right? This is where productivity is restored, everyone's emotions are back in even keel as much as it can be in an office, which again is made of people who are never entirely emotionally normal. But everyone feels more in control. They're settling down into their new roles. That fear is gone. Everyone understands their place. And everyone's engaging with the new solution or the new process. Work is coming back to normal. So when you're in this stage, it's really important for you to acknowledge and reward your team members for contributing, because you want to keep them motivated and excited and committed, because trust me, this is not the last change you're going to have to implement. You're going to want to reward people for their dedication and for their acceptance, and also highlight your successes. Because again, trust me, there's always going to be future improvements, and you want to keep energy high to keep people being ready to move on to that next level. Because because we've reached the point of acceptance, it doesn't mean our work is done. We need to make sure that we are providing resources to reinforce the positive experience that people are that's happening in the organization, and make sure that they have sufficient ongoing support. So there are a variety of resources and strategies that we can employ to ensure long-term success. So let's talk about a few of them. So how many of you have found case studies to be helpful when selecting a product or service? So feel free to drop it in the chat if you think case studies are awesome. I'll keep an eye out and see if anyone raises their hand. I mean, I use case studies all the time because they reassure me that, hey, someone else has done this and it's worked. But case studies, they don't have to be just externally facing. You can do internal promotion of your successes too. And this is where I say you really have to think like a marketer. You have to market your successes within the organization. As an example, the city of Boca Raton, Florida sends a monthly email showcasing the great uses of their document management software. They highlight a new process they've automated since the last email and the results they've seen. And this serves a few purposes. They're able to recognize the hard work of others and show appreciation for their hard work, which helps them build new champion. It sparks ideas in other departments of ways to use the software, which makes it easier to continue expanding and automating new processes. And it reinforces to executive management that the project is strategic and making a difference in the organization. Again, it's all about marketing. But in order for people to stay engaged with the project, it's more than just marketing. They need to feel comfortable with the new processes and technologies. It doesn't matter if you do initial launch training, people are likely to forget what they learned or get going with the system and have new areas of interest. So you're going to want to host regular ongoing trainings. And as we know, training is most effective when people can be hands-on. So try to make it engaging and focused. But what can be even more sustainable than class-based training is web-based trainings. You might consider things like filming your basic how-to training and make it available on the web so you don't need to repeat yourself over and over and over again. It'll save you time when you're delivering content to your users. Ramsey County, Minnesota did this and created a series of video tutorials when they were launching their new document management project. Guess who the actors were in these videos? It was the Flintstones. It was a fun way to engage staff, but still deliver the critical training that users needed. This is an area where you might want to see if you can engage your vendors. Many vendors offer online training courses that you can recommend to users who are looking for additional training and support. And this can be especially useful for those super advanced users who are looking for in-depth material that you don't have the time or the expertise to develop. And finally, think about your intranet. You won't always be available to answer users' questions, and they might not always want to ask you. So make sure that you're posting helpful resources that demonstrate how to use your system on your intranet page or your company website, internal website, so it's easily accessible for everyone. And if you need help developing this, try using your vendor for support because they should have materials that you can piggyback off of. Also, you're going to want to keep track of frequently asked questions as you're going through the onboarding process so you can develop a document that answers those questions. And that's something also great to post on the intranet. All of these training opportunities have a time and a place, and they should all be part of your plan to continue engaging people throughout the organization. So with that, I'm going to sum up here with some quick takeaways, because if I can sum up everything that I talked about, there's a few things. And the first is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And if you've ever read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll recognize this. And that's, don't tell people what you want to say. Make sure you're saying in a way that they can understand. And I know a lot of us, myself included, struggle with this because it's easy to wait for someone to close their mouth and then start talking. Instead, you want to listen with your ears, not with your mouth. Don't just wait for someone to start talking so you can start talking. You want to really listen to what they're saying. And especially with something like change management, when you're dealing with people that are likely afraid, you really need to listen to what they're saying so you can get at the heart of their concerns. The next is communicate. Communication is so important through every stage on the change curve, whether it's making sure that you're embracing all the channels of communication, letting people vent, highlighting your successes. You really need to think like a marketer and communicate through the entire process. And the final thing is, remember to make it fun. You know your organization best, and you know what will work in your organization. And maybe it's not hot pink shirts. Maybe it's not, Flintstones videos, but you can really think about what will be fun and engaging for your users and what might make them pay attention. So think about that, because the more excited you are, the more you believe in the positive impact this is going to make on your organization, the more excited other people will be. You can't expect other people to be excited if you're not excited. So remember that you need to sort of be the person who's really excited, even when other people are like, ugh, and all you hear all day is people being like, why do you have to do this? Why do you have to cause problems? Things are fine the way they are. You have to remember that if you aren't sort of shining that light, no one is going to follow you. And I like to sum that up with the idea, be a dolphin, not a whale. And this goes back to my example I used of our HR department, who sends an email Friday at 3 p.m. changing a major policy and then runs away for the weekend. That's a whale. Instead, no one likes that, right? Instead, you want to be a dolphin, small changes over a period of time. First, talk to your managers and be like, hey, we're thinking about changing this policy. What do you think? Even if you don't listen to anything they say, at least they feel like they had the chance to buy into it and they feel like they're part of the change. Then maybe you send an email to your manager saying, hey, we're going to change this policy on this date, and we're going to send an email out to employees, just FYI. Then send an email to employees. That's the dolphin method of change. Small changes over a period of time versus the plop, everyone email, run for the hills. And when you're a dolphin, you're much likely to get those changes because you're remembering to include all the people that are facing changes versus just dropping the change, being like, here's our new system, surprise, bye, see you later, and running for the hills. So with that, I'm really excited that you joined me today. I'm excited that you invited me. My contact information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I love to talk about change management. I'd be happy to share any of the resources with you if you'd like a copy of the deck, a copy of any of the resources I mentioned. Otherwise, I will open it up for questions.
Melissa, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question. I just heard you talk about you have to be excited about this change, right? Do you feel though that an introvert or an extrovert has more chance of driving change, or really does it depend on your passion?
That's a really good question. And my answer is, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert. I am extremely introverted. And I would like to think you can't guess that I'm an introvert from listening to me present. Introversion versus extroversion, it has to do more with how you recharge at the end of the day. Like, yes, I can get up in front of a room and present, but then I'm likely to be hiding in the bathroom, like just to get some alone time. But so it doesn't mean that you can't drive change as an introvert. It just means you're going to have to be aware of your energy levels after you're talking to people all day. I think both introverts and extroverts are equally able to drive change.
One more question for you, but I'm going to wait to see if there's anybody else here.
Ask away. Oh, and thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the dolphin, not a whale analogy. I actually used that at work today, and because the HR example I used is a real example that actually happened today.
But it's only Thursday.
Yes. Who knows what will happen Friday at 3 p.m.
There is a question from another Isabel.
Oh, that's a great question. So the question is, how do you manage change dictated by senior managers, especially when the senior manager thinks they know best and do not care about the people? That is a struggle. So it depends on what the change is, and it also depends on the senior manager's role in the organization. I have had this situation a few times, and what I've done is what I like to call the end run, where I've been like, sure, that sounds great. And as I've gone and said, I'm going to build support for, and talk to other people, socialize the change. And as I've socialized the change, I've been able to have other senior managers in the organization be like, wait, this doesn't make sense. And then they start pushing back against the change. So it's easier to have them push back at their level. So that's one way to push back without necessarily pushing back, is to get, again, it kind of goes back to the idea of getting other people to carry the water for you. But while making it look like you're being very effective and being a real team player by socializing the change with other managers. And I see we have another question. How do you get over if it ain't broke, don't fix it reaction to changes in processes? Welcome to denial. Denial is actually the hardest. I think of the change curve. Denial is the hardest stage of the change curve, especially with people who have been in an organization for a long time, or a process that has been kind of one way for a long time. And sometimes in that case, it may just be like you may have to build support around those people. And that's where the 4P exercise comes in handy. How, if that attitude is coming from one person, how much do you need that person to change? Like, is that person key to the process? Can you go to that person's boss? Can you go around that person? Do you just need them to stop? Do you just need them to stop blocking it, and just, will they get on board if everyone else if there's a groundswell and they're just going to be like, okay, well, I can't change it anymore, so I might as well get on board? Or is it going to be more like they're just always going to be the cranky person in the organization complaining in the corner, and they will eventually manage themselves out? So I feel that one hard, very, very hard, because it is hard to change processes. And so it's helpful in this case to figure out where that reaction is coming from. Is it coming from senior management? Is it coming from executive management? Is it coming from, sort of the wider organization, or is it coming from one specific person? Oh, interesting question. Is there a maximum timeline where you see the change initiative fail? 6 months, 1 year, or 90-day timeline you presented on it? Of course, it is organizational culture dependent. Some changes take longer than others to roll out. I actually just got a change initiative done that I've been working on for 1.5 years. And in this case, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I will get this done. So one thing, I don't know if you've ever read The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a book that, and there's a training from Franklin Covey. But one thing they talk about is the whirlwind, and how we have all these ideas for strategy and to change strategy, but they all get sucked away into the whirlwind, which is our day-to-day stuff we have to do, right? So I think we can all think of like these great initiatives that sort of came up and then they died. And it's not like anyone was like, oh, kill Project X. It was just like Project X was just suffocated by the whirlwind, and it sort of died this quiet death in the corner, and everyone forgot about it because they went on doing their day-to-day work. So I think it really is organization dependent. Some organizations just take longer than others to get changes implemented, but they will get done eventually. There's some organizations are just slower to change. Some organizations are really quick. I think it also depends on the type of change. I'm working on something right now that it's like a 5-year plan, but other changes, it may be like 5 months. So it really is dependent on the project and the organization. And I hope that answered your question, although it really didn't answer your question.
Well, Melissa, I see we're running up on our time, but I really want to thank you for your wonderfully informative presentation. And I hope that will help all of us achieve our change goals and keep our colleagues sane if they were sane before. Hopefully that recording will be made available on ARMA Hawaii Chapter's website soon. And if anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out to Melissa directly. And I look forward to seeing each of you at another ARMA Hawaii Chapter event. All right, everybody, take care and stay safe.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa.
You are very welcome. Did you stop the recording? I think you have to do it on your end.
I have to do it on my end because I just changed that. Let me see here. Recording. I see a stop. Okay. Stop. Yeah. Recording.